On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. Bruce Lee, the martial artist, actor, and philosopher who reshaped global perceptions of Asian identity and action cinema, died suddenly on July 20, 1973, at the age of 32. His death, caused by cerebral edema, swelling of the brain, was officially attributed to a hypersensitivity reaction to a painkiller. Yet the circumstances surrounding his passing, sudden and mysterious, have since fueled decades of speculation, conspiracy theories, and myth-making, transforming his death into one of pop culture's most enigmatic moments. Lee's death occurred at the height of his fame. He had just completed filming Enter the Dragon, the film that would catapult him to international superstardom and forever change martial arts and cinema. His untimely passing reflected both the physical intensity of his lifestyle and the pressures placed on a cultural pioneer who bore the weight of representing both East and West. In an era marked by racial stereotypes and limited roles for Asian actors, Bruce Lee broke barriers with charisma, discipline, and philosophy, becoming not just a performer, but a global symbol of self-mastery and cultural fusion. The immediate consequences of Lee's death were both tragic and transformative. While the entertainment world mourned the loss of a visionary, Enter the Dragon was released posthumously and became a box office hit, cementing Lee's legend. His death, paradoxically, amplified his presence, elevating him from rising star to immortal icon. For many, he became a martyr of misunderstood genius, a philosopher warrior whose life was cut short before his full impact could unfold. In the decades since, Bruce Lee has been immortalized in statues, films, books, and countless tributes. He inspired not only martial artists and filmmakers, but generations of thinkers and activists who saw in him a model of cultural pride, resilience, and innovation. His legacy bridges continents and disciplines, embodying the belief that physical excellence and intellectual depth are not separate pursuits, but deeply intertwined. Bruce Lee's death reveals our fascination with the fragility of brilliance, the allure of legends lost too soon, and the enduring power of those who redefine the limits of their time. We preserve his memory through art, cinema, philosophy, and the movements he inspired, proof that true influence does not end with life, but echoes across time like the sound of a distant, decisive strike. Chester Bennington, the lead vocalist of Linkin Park and one of the most iconic voices of early 2000s rock, died by suicide on July 20, 2017, at the age of 41. He was found in his California home on what would have been the birthday of his close friend and fellow musician Chris Cornell, who had died by suicide just 2 months prior. Bennington's passing sent shockwaves through the music world and among millions of fans globally, exposing the deep and often silent battles with mental health that many artists endure behind the scenes. Bennington's death reflected the growing awareness of the mental health crisis, particularly among men and within high-pressure industries like entertainment. Despite his fame, success, and a seemingly fulfilling family life, Bennington had long struggled with depression, substance abuse, and trauma stemming from childhood abuse. His open discussions about his inner demons in interviews and his raw confessional lyrics resonated with a generation that was beginning to challenge the stigma around emotional vulnerability. The immediate aftermath of his death was marked by an outpouring of grief and tributes. Fellow musicians, fans, and mental health advocates celebrated his contributions while using the moment to highlight the importance of mental health support. Songs like Numb, Crawling, and One More Light took on new meaning, as fans revisited them not just as anthems of angst, but as cries for help layered with sincerity and pain. His death also led to increased dialogue within the music industry about emotional wellness and the hidden toll of constant public performance. Chester Bennington's passing did amplify his legend, but in a way that extended beyond fame. It turned his legacy into a movement. His voice, which once roared through arenas, became a symbol of resilience, empathy, and the urgency of listening to ourselves and to others. Mental health organizations continue to use his story to inspire outreach, especially to young men reluctant to seek help. Bennington's death reminds us that mortality is not only physical, it can be emotional, silent, and preventable. In art, we remember him through the thunder of his voice and the honesty of his words. We immortalize him not just as a rock star, but as a symbol of courage and vulnerability, urging us to replace silence with support and pain with purpose. Tammy Faye Mesner, once a vibrant and controversial figure in American televangelism, died of cancer on July 20, 2007, at the age of 65. Her death, the result of a long and public battle with colon cancer that had spread to her lungs, came after years of both reinvention and redemption. Known equally for her exaggerated mascara and enormous empathy, Tammy Faye's passing marked the end of one of the most dramatic personal journeys in the modern American religious and media landscape. She rose to prominence in the 1970s and 1980s alongside her then-husband, Jim Bakker, co-founding the Praise the Lord, PTL Network, and Heritage USA, one of the largest Christian theme parks in the world. The couple's empire collapsed in scandal in 1987 when Bakker was imprisoned for fraud and conspiracy. Throughout this downfall, Tammy Faye became a symbol of both ridicule and resilience. Her tear-streaked face on television became emblematic of televangelism's excesses, but also of its emotional rawness and appeal. Yet it was in her later years that she subverted public expectations. Tammy Faye re-emerged as a surprising figure of acceptance and compassion, especially toward the LGBTQ+ community during the AIDS crisis, a stance uncommon in the evangelical world at the time. Her support for marginalized groups, paired with her unshakable belief in God's unconditional love, redefined her image. When she died, weighing less than 70 pounds, and appearing frail in a final interview just days before, the public saw not the caricature of the past, but a woman who had endured and evolved. Her death reflected the changing values of her era, from judgment to empathy, from dogma to inclusion. She had become a mirror of America's shifting relationship with faith, media, and authenticity. The immediate response was one of both sorrow and admiration. Tributes poured in, not just from religious followers, but from the very communities she once helped humanize to a suspicious world. Tammy Faye's passing reveals how mortality can soften public memory, allowing space for redemption and complexity. We immortalize her not only through documentaries, interviews, and dramatizations, but through the legacy of compassion she championed in the face of rejection. Her life, once framed by scandal, ended as a testament to transformation, proof that memory, like faith, can outlast even the fiercest storms. Francoise Arnneu, the French actress whose beauty and elegance defined post-war French cinema, died of natural causes on July 20, 2021, at the age of 90. Her passing, peaceful and quiet, stood in contrast to the fervent cultural wave she once helped shape during the golden age of French film. Best known for her roles in the 1950s, Arnneu was a symbol of the Nouvelle Vague's emergence and the broader liberation of European cinema from the moral constraints of the pre-war era. Arnneu rose to prominence with films like French Cancan, 1955, by Jean Renoir, where she played strong yet sensual women, roles that offered nuanced depictions of female independence during a time when traditional gender roles were being reconsidered. Her image, poised, defiant, and alluring, reflected a France recovering from occupation and embracing new ideas of freedom, art, and identity. Arnneu's presence on screen was both a comfort and a provocation, speaking to a generation in flux. Her death marked the fading of a glamorous yet transitional period in cinema history. By the time she passed, the actresses of her era had become mythic, remembered as much for the changing world they inhabited as for the characters they portrayed. Unlike stars whose lives ended in tragedy, Arnneu's long life and graceful exit gave space for a full appreciation of her artistry without the sensationalism that so often shadows celebrity death. Her passing allowed France and the global film community to reflect on the lasting influence of a quieter kind of stardom, one built on consistency, strength, and subtle rebellion. Though not a global icon like some of her contemporaries, Francoise Arnneu left an imprint on French cultural memory. Her image remains preserved in posters, interviews, and restored film prints that continue to captivate film students and cinephiles alike. She symbolizes a moment when film itself was becoming more daring, more personal, and more female-driven. Arnneu's death reminds us that mortality, when met with grace, becomes a final chapter in an already eloquent story. We immortalize her not only in the roles she played, but in the spirit she represented, a woman ahead of her time, confident in her voice and artistry. In her passing, the light of classic cinema flickers but does not fade. It endures, framed in memory and celluloid alike. Sandy Posey, the American singer best known for her poignant hits during the 1960s, including Born a Woman and Single Girl, passed away peacefully on July 20, 2021, at the age of 78. Her death from natural causes closed the final chapter on a life and career that captured the emotional heartbeat of an era defined by cultural upheaval, shifting gender roles, and musical revolution. While her name may not command the same instant recognition as some of her contemporaries, her voice shaped a moment in American history where country, pop, and feminism intersected, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in tension. Posey's songs, characterized by her ethereal vocals and haunting emotional delivery, often spoke to the societal expectations of women during the mid-20th century. Her most famous track, Born a Woman, released in 1966, was both a commercial hit and a lyrical paradox. While some listeners interpreted it as reinforcing traditional gender roles, others saw it as a subtle commentary on the limitations and pain endured by women of the time. Her music reflected the era's deep ambivalence, a time when women were increasingly finding their voices, yet often still expected to conform to patriarchal ideals. Her passing didn't provoke international headlines, but it stirred quiet reverence among fans and music historians who recognized her role in blending country sensibility with pop accessibility. Posey's songs have since been reinterpreted through a more modern lens, viewed not just as nostalgic ballads, but as emotional documents of a woman navigating the changing tides of identity and independence during the 1960s and 70s. Sandy Posey's death also served as a moment of reflection on how female voices, particularly in music, can be both praised and misunderstood, cherished and overlooked. Her work reminds us that cultural influence isn't always loud. It often resonates quietly over time, waiting for new ears and fresh interpretations. In remembering Posey, we engage in the broader act of honoring artists whose impact is felt in emotion rather than headlines. We immortalize her through the radio stations that still play her ballads, the singers who emulate her gentle strength, and the listeners who find solace in her voice. Her passing reminds us that mortality may claim the body, but memory preserves the music. The soul behind the song endures. Linda Sterling, a striking presence in mid-20th century cinema, passed away from cancer on July 20, 1997, at the age of 75. Best known for her roles in action-packed serials during the 1940s, Sterling earned fame as a rare female lead in a genre dominated by men. Her most iconic role came in The Tiger Woman, 1944, where she defied the norms of her time, performing stunts and embodying physical strength on screen, qualities rarely afforded to women in Hollywood's golden age. Sterling's death, though quiet and largely absent from mainstream headlines, reflected a broader historical pattern, the fading away of the unsung trailblazers of classic Hollywood. Her passing marked the end of a career that helped redefine women's roles in cinema, even if it was only later recognized for its significance. At a time when post-war America was reinforcing domestic ideals of femininity, Sterling played characters who rode horses, fought villains, and took command, foreshadowing the rise of action heroines decades later. The immediate consequence of her passing was a modest yet heartfelt remembrance among film historians and fans of serial cinema. As one of the few women to dominate the action genre in the 1940s, her legacy grew more appreciated in retrospect. Scholars and collectors began revisiting her work, not just for nostalgia, but for what it revealed about gender, spectacle, and media in mid-century America. Her death, in a way, amplified her legend by inviting reappraisal. At a time when Hollywood was finally beginning to recognize and elevate stories of women's strength and independence, Sterling's career stood as an early, often overlooked example. She became part of a broader re-evaluation of classic film history, one that seeks to recover the stories of those who challenged conventions before it was fashionable to do so. Linda Sterling's passing invites us to consider how memory, like film, can fade unless intentionally preserved. We immortalize figures like her not only in film reels and fan retrospectives, but in the evolving narratives we tell about gender, power, and representation. Her life and work remind us that even in eras constrained by tradition, there are those who forge paths forward, silent for a time, but never forgotten. James Doohan, best known for portraying the beloved Montgomery Scotty Scott on Star Trek, died of pneumonia and complications from Alzheimer's disease on July 20, 2005, at the age of 85. A Canadian veteran of World War II and an actor whose career became inseparable from one role, Doohan's passing marked more than the loss of a performer. It signaled the end of an era when science fiction first began to reflect humanity's highest hopes and deepest fears about technology, unity, and the future. Doohan's most iconic role as the chief engineer of the USS Enterprise came at a pivotal time in American culture. Star Trek debuted in 1966 during the height of the Cold War and the space race. The show's multicultural interplanetary crew represented a utopian vision of cooperation and progress. Duhan, with his signature Scottish accent and quick problem-solving, became an emblem of practical ingenuity. He wasn't just a character, he was a symbol of the everyman hero, the technician behind the scenes, making miracles happen. His death brought a wave of tributes from fans, scientists, engineers, and military veterans alike. NASA acknowledged the influence Star Trek had on inspiring generations of scientists and astronauts, many of whom cited Duhan's portrayal as a reason they entered the field. The passing of Scotty did not just affect popular culture, it reminded the world of the power of imaginative fiction to shape real-world aspirations. A portion of Duhan's ashes was even sent into space, twice, underscoring his enduring symbolic connection to exploration. Duhan's death reflected the broader values of his era, the post-war belief in progress, the merging of science and storytelling, and the ideal of teamwork across boundaries. At a time when the world was struggling with division and rapid change, he embodied the calm, capable bridge between man and machine, dream and reality. In remembering James Doohan, we see how actors can become more than entertainers. They become mythmakers. We immortalize him not just in reruns and conventions, but in the quiet workspaces of engineers who grew up hearing, "I'm giving her all she's got, Captain." His passing reminds us that mortality may claim the man, but not the message. Through character, courage, and imagination, James Doohan helped make the stars feel just a little closer.